Spiritual intimacy, spiritual community. Why is this so important for our soul? My name is Crystal Arthur, functional nutrition and wholeness coach, host of Functional Faith Show, owner and founder of Functional Faith Wholeness Coaching, where we empower fed up millennials in St. Louis and beyond to feed their mind, body, and spirit so they can have simplicity, confidence, and freedom in their healthcare and soul care. I am on Clubhouse this morning, so if you have the app, feel free to join me over there. So this weekend, we've been talking about this epidemic of loneliness and how millennials and Gen Z, we're the loneliest generation to have ever lived. And so today we're talking about the importance of community for the soul. If you missed it this weekend, yesterday we talked about the importance of community for the mind, and Friday we talked about the importance of community for the body. So what is a community for the soul? What does that even mean? Well, a community for the soul can look like a church community. It can also look like a small group or a DNA, or it can look like a Bible study. It can look like many different things in many different religions. And even outside of religion, there are spaces where people gather together to just minister to one another on a soul level, to do soulful listening to each other. Well, why is this so important to have? Well, it's important to have this kind of space. When we look at the Bible, for instance, the Christian Bible, it talks about not forsaking the gathering, right? And that's not just because it makes you holier to go to church on Sunday or Wednesday or Tuesday, whenever you worship, Saturday. It's because there is a dynamic that takes place in a community where you're gathering together to tend to your soul, right? There is a synergistic effect that is happening there. Why is that the case? I think partly because of the intentionality of it, taking intentional time to examine one's own soul, to say, search my heart, God, and to do that with other people. I think if you've lived long enough, you know that there are some things that you just cannot see about yourself. There's some aspects of your personality that don't come out. And by personality, I don't just mean on a surface level, but really, like, there's just some colors of your soul that are not born alone, right? There's just a dynamic to just being with oneself where that it's cool, it's chilling. But then when you're with somebody else, maybe in marriage or with your kids or just in a community setting, in the office place, where someone else can trigger you and you can point the finger at them, but in all reality, if you draw back and observe yourself, you can see that they actually gave you a gift. They actually gave you a gift, in that they triggered you to show you that you had that button to push in the first place, right? So now you have the opportunity to explore, why? Why was that already a sore spot? Why did that make me as upset as it did? Why did that hurt me as deeply as it did? What is that all about? And that's what we call soul searching, right? Like doing some soul searching. Who am I really? What matters to me most? What are my values? What are my principles? Where do I break integrity with myself or with others or with God? So often that really comes out in community. And so, doing that soul searching, and when you're able to do that in a in a community for your soul, in a spiritual community, it's really great because you have like-minded people with you who can call you up and out sometimes. That's needed, right? Or encourage you, or for a Christianese word, edify you, exhort you. That's very needed. Um, so how do we offer that kind of community, or how do we find that kind of community? Um, Many of us, I think, especially in our generation, we don't find it as easy as perhaps our parents or our grandparents did. Um, for so many of us, we've experienced some level of church trauma, or or betrayal, or shaming, or whatever it might be in spiritual community. So how do you find that kind of space? It's difficult, right? It's very difficult because you can't just go on a website and find out if that space is going to be feel safe for you, right? But I offer a challenge to still step out, put yourself out there in vulnerability, to search for that space. It might not be the first, second, or third space that you find, but I do. This whole weekend we've been discussing how it's important, physically, mentally, and spiritually, to have community, right? And I offer that community. It's important that you're able to have intimacy on a soulful level, um, because we are not just bodies and minds. We also are spirit, and so much so, science is backing that up nowadays. There's a dynamic to us that is unquantifiable. Is that a word? I think so. Like, it can't be put under a microscope, but it is true, but it's real, and it is so much who we really are. And so it's worth it. And I would also offer that spiritual community, a community for your soul, is not just a community where you're discussing ideas or theology or doctrine, but true intimacy on a soulful level is where you're also discussing, really primarily discussing your experience of the divine, your experience of God. Um, it it doesn't. Let me see if I have a quote on this. I had something pulled up, so let me see. Um, More important, however, spiritual intimacy involves sharing our experience of God. I might tell my friend about a recent period of spiritual dryness in which God seemed absent, or I might express gratitude associated with an answer to prayer, or I might share an unusually strong sense of spiritual hunger. This is not the same as discussing theology, church politics, or even the Sunday sermon. Genuine spiritual intimacy involves sharing my experience, not simply my ideas. And that is from, ooh, there's so much more here. um, I'm just going to, yep. Intimacy can be experienced in a variety of forms. Two people are spiritually intimate when they share a spiritual experience, emotionally intimate when they share emotional experience, sexually intimate when they share sexual experiences, and intellectually intimate when they share intellectual experiences. And then it goes on to talk about other forms of intimacy. But the point is that sometimes in our spiritual community, we're only discussing ideas about God, right? And um, God, I don't believe that God came and walked this earth and was among us, and suffered for us, and showed love and forgiveness to us for us to just intellectually debate or ponder about it, right? What's the pontificate? Okay, I'm trying too hard now, but that's my point. It wasn't, God didn't come for us to make God more complicated. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't for us to create Christianese words that only a subset of people can understand if you are in the right circles, right? It wasn't to, if in our spiritual communities we're making God more complicated, I just don't think that's why God came. I think God came to get on our level, to meet us where we are, to make things more simple, rather than us trying to um, reach and grasp and attain some sort of just holiness, and which is just impossibly uh, forcing ourselves to reach up. God didn't even reach down, came down, right? Love came down to set us free. And so when we talk about all this, high, um, high doctrine and philosophy and theology, it's not the same as experiencing spiritual, soulful intimacy and sharing our intimacy with God in community with others. That looks like our experience. So finding a space where we can do that is so important, because it might not be our spouse, it might not be our parent, it might not be our best friend, but exploring spirituality, exploring our souls, it's such a journey. In and of itself, it is a journey, and journeying together. Oh, I don't think I ever shared the name of that book that I was quoting. It's called Sacred Companions, and it's actually a book about spiritual direction, what it is and what it isn't. And really, a spiritual direction is something that we can offer in community to one another, right? Because we believe in the priesthood of, I don't know why I said that and said priesthood, of all believers. We don't believe that anyone is more spiritual just because they have a title or a position in a church or in a temple or whatever it may be. We believe that we all have equal access to the divine, right? And so we can offer spiritual direction to one another in community, by holding space for our souls, and talking to one another about our experience of God, um, fully aware of God's presence. And in that way, we are praying. where it's a prayerful community, and God's presence can be known in that community if we just are aware, because God's always with us, right? It's just a matter of our level of awareness. So being in community with other people who are being very intentional of God's presence, it really is a sacred and holy, that makes it a sacred companion. It makes it a holy gathering just by our awareness. So now, what do you do with this information? Well, I'll go back to what I was saying before. Man, and this is hard for some of us, but be willing to be vulnerable and um, find that space. Find that space, recognize how important it is, and be willing to step out and search for it, right? You can look online. Nowadays, we have the ability to watch sermons online to kind of get a vibe for like that church, or looking at parachurch communities, and forming them ourselves, whether or not there's somebody local that we connect with, reaching out to old friends that we can just that we can just share our souls with, bare our soul to. So if you don't have a shame-free space where you can explore holistic spirituality, and I say holistic spirituality because that's what we've really been talking about this whole weekend when we were talking about our bodies, a community for the body, when we're talking about community for the mind, talking about community for the soul. I love the idea of holistic holiness, right? Because the root of the word holiness is actually like whole, being whole. So, being whole and experiencing all that God has for us, in the body, within our minds, and within our souls. So if you're looking for a place where you can explore holistic spirituality, and reclaim who you are in body, mind, and spirit, I do want to invite you into our community. I have a community with my coaching clients, and it's evolving. We're developing it, and I know it's going to be and is already a space of love and compassion and patience and grace. Where we can explore these things, we can talk about our experience of God and experience the divine all the time together. So, in conclusion, we say that um, we say it takes a village to raise a child. And I want to offer to you that we all have an inner child, and we are all still raising ourselves, right? In our culture, we don't have like a rite of passage for most people. I actually did go through a rite of passage program in my church as a child, but for most of us, we don't have any sort of initiation into adulthood. So, especially if you're a millennial or Gen Z, I think we really kind of feel that, like, okay, like I'm 30, am I adulting now? Like this is like what is that makes that shift? I personally don't always feel like I am a full-blown grown adult. I do a lot more since hitting 30, but that's another thing for another time. But um, we don't have an initiation into adulthood. Um, but we can have that. We can offer that to one another in community. The process of learning to listen to our bodies, listen to our minds, listen to our souls, and fully taking ownership and authority and being the leader of our life, being our stepping into that role that our parents once played, but now doing it for ourselves, nurturing ourselves, protecting ourselves, and reclaiming who we are, not everything that life has told us that we are. Um, that is something that we're going to be talking more about um, uh, the first week of July. We're calling it Freedom Week, and I want to invite you to participate in that. If you enjoyed this weekend, we're going to be diving even deeper into how to listen to ourselves and how to have this reclamation experience and live more freely, live more alive, and do it all in community. So you're invited to that. If you want to know more, then feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, community is really, really important. Loneliness is an epidemic, and none of us have to go it alone. All right. Well, I love you, and I hope you enjoyed our show this weekend. Join us next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 8 a.m. as we discuss nurturing our body, nurturing our minds, and nurturing our souls. All right. If you have the Clubhouse app, do come on stage. I look forward to talking to you. That's it. Go in peace and presence.